about this project. Like I said, I'm gonna skip some of the slides probably. Let's start with this picture here. Do you know what are you looking at here? Any guess? Yeah, that is the Brazilian Amazon. Right here you have the Amazon River. Here is the area, the Rondônia area. I know that many of you work in Acre. Acre is like this way. And here is the. Am I supposed to turn it on or?
Tenta com o botão da direita. Aí, yeah.
Maybe, okay, I'll figure it out. Okay, and this is just an overview of where the Suruí area is located. It's this polygon, and you can see all this whitish area here. All of that represents deforestation. So they are inserted in an area that is really under threat of deforestation. And just for you guys to have an idea of what has happened there, Google had put a lot of satellite images from since the first images that they got from the Landsat until the most recent ones. And they come up with interesting videos. And because this area where the Suruís are is such a good example of deforestation, and it's so recent, and because it's so recent, they were able to come up with this image that you're seeing right now. So you can see how the deforestation is expanding, and then as the years go by, you can see really the polygon of the Surui land popping up here in the image. And that is what's really behind what's happening in that region and what the Suruís are facing. So let's go back. Okay, so the first official contact of the Surui community with the Western civilization, if you want to call it like that, was in 1969. And this is just a really interesting picture of this moment when they got contact. And it was really, really bad for the community, as you can imagine. Before the contact, they were estimated to be around 5,000, and like 2 years after that, they were reduced to only 250 Suruís in the community, mainly because of the diseases that they got from the white folks. But that substantially changed the way of living of the Suruís, as you can imagine. Before the contact, they had pretty much to hunt for their food. And after the contact, they had access to markets, so they were able to start buying food from cities and so forth. I remember that when I was in the Suruí, one of the Suruís were telling me that it was really, I mean, I guess it is in general really hard to hunt in the forest. And then he was telling me that one of the things that they hunt is monkeys. And then sometimes they shoot an arrow at a monkey, and the monkey grabs it from its body and throws it back at the Suruís. And so you can only imagine that it's really helpful to have a city close by to the community that you have access to start feeding. But of course, that generated a lot of problems for the community. And also, you have access to cities, you have access to goods, but you need to have money to buy those goods, right? Of course. But the Suruís were able to come up with a good idea of how to make easy money. They would just let loggers inside the indigenous land, and they didn't have to do anything. The loggers would go there, extract as much as timber as they wanted, and pay a really terrible amount of money to the Suruís for the amount of timber they were extracting. And with that, the Suruís were inserted in the market. And for a long time, this is what you would see surrounding their indigenous land. A bunch of trucks loaded with very valuable timber leaving the indigenous community. At the same time, right on the border of the community, you would see this expansion of cattle ranching and other commodities like soybean and so forth. And with time, it's not really, I don't really know how that happened, but with time, the Suruís realized that maybe their revenue from timber was decreasing, or maybe it was this other NGO that started contacting the Surui community and started talking with them about sustainable management and so forth. But the fact is that the Suruís realized that what they were doing was not sustainable. And at one point, they would be in a bad situation because they would run out of timber and so forth, although they have a really, really huge area. But that is the main story. So they started this contact with this NGO. This is a great NGO that works with many tribes in the Amazon. They develop a lot of different projects with them. And the idea was to come up with a sustainable strategy for the Suruís. But they needed money to implement whatever they were considering to have for the Suruís, like their sustainable management plan. And then it's when some folks from the forest trends might actually know the guy who was in charge. That was a Brazilian guy. Actually, Maida did her thesis with the Suruís, looking into REDD and the indigenous communities, so she can actually explain a lot of this stuff. Borges. She probably knows more about the community than me. But the forest trends did an assessment of the Surui area, and they said, you know what, you can potentially have a REDD project to fund whatever sustainable strategies that you need. And they moved on with that idea. They said, okay, let's try to do that. But in order to implement the project, they had to get assistance from other NGOs as well. Like I said, when you're implementing a REDD project, there's a lot going on. You need to consider so many things, and you need sort of a network to address different points of the project. And then they come up with a series of documents based on a series of workshops that were conducted with the community. So they started basically mapping the community and what they had there. So with the community, they come up with a bunch of maps like this, where the Suruís were mapping where they use, in which areas they would go for fishing or to produce some crop or to hunt. And they have many of those maps. I was only able to find this one, but some of them are really interesting. They select the places and they say, oh, this is a really sacred place for our community, or over there's a spirit living there, so we shouldn't go there, and so forth. It's really interesting. This is not the most interesting map that come up with, but. And then together with the cunning there, like the NGO that I presented, they put up this sustainable management plan. And this is the document that explains that sustainable management plan. And here they come up with a lot of different strategies, and I really don't know all of them, but they cover things like sustainable food production, other business opportunities for the community, because of course they decided not to illegally cut down the forest anymore. So they need to replace that revenue with more sustainable revenues. So one of the business plans was related to selling the handcrafts that they would produce. And this is one of the necklaces that they have. And you can just pass it along. Like they also were thinking about ecotourism and so forth.
This is one necklace.
Yeah, this is one of, yeah. The more number of circles that you have, the more important you are. But I guess you can just buy them without being important. And they come up with a series of plans and strategies to manage the land sustainably, right? But yeah, because they were relying on carbon to fund this new plan, they had actually to see if the community as a whole would be willing to engage in this idea of carbon. So they come up with this free pre-informed consent for the Surui project, where they contact the community. They had thousands of meetings and so forth. And then by the end of the day, the community said, okay, let's do that, let's try that. I mean, at least most of the, a few villages inside the community still were like, you know what, I don't like this. I'm gonna continue selling timber because I can make a lot of money from that and it's easy for me. I don't really understand what is this deal with carbon. Many Suruís were said the sentence. They said, "How can you trade something that you cannot see?" And well, there's the sentences in the manuscript, but basically, it's, how can you make money out of something that you cannot see? You don't know where it is. This is such an abstract concept. How can we buy into this idea? But they did, and partially because they were influenced by the NGOs, partially because they had a really great leader that I'm going to show it to you guys soon, called Suruí, and he was really passionate. He is really passionate about the forest, and he's just a great guy. I'll show you a video.
But did all those workshops also have some impact on their interest in the project?
Well, yes, because they went from knowing nothing to knowing some, but still you can tell that they don't completely understand this concept of REDD. And what? No. Well, yeah, for 10,000. But it's funny because when you're talking with the Suruís, they are very sexist. So they would say stuff like, when you're in an official meeting with people that are involved in the REDD project, they would say, yeah, Suruí women don't understand carbon, but we do, we're the men. And then the Suruí woman would say, oh, shut up, you don't understand it either. And this is pretty much what happens there. I mean, it's really weird concept. And then they come up with this document for the Suruí fund to manage the revenues. Okay, I can tell that I'm not going to finish the presentation, so I'm going to have to skip some of the things. I just think it would be really interesting to see this video. So when they were implementing the REDD project, they had to come up with a strategy to monitor the forest, and they had the support from Google. And then this is just a video that talks a little bit about it.
And use this as a way to protect the forest.
Quem defende a floresta passa pela essa vida. Começaram a ameaçar madeireiras, pessoas.
Chief Almir had seen Google Earth in an internet app in 2007, asked for our help. His idea was if we could teach the young people how to use it, how to interview the elders, record this content, attach it to them, it would be a way of sharing their culture with the world. When we came down this year, we trained the Surui people on how to use a new technology using cell phones. So when illegal loggers penetrate their land, they'll be able to take photographs, videos that are GPS located, immediately upload to Google Earth, alert the law enforcement authorities, and use this as a way to protect the forest. So who's ever responsible for enforcing the law? They can't deny that it happened anymore, because 500 million people around the world can see it with their own eyes. Tropical deforestation accounts for 20% of the greenhouse gas emissions that we all produce. People under Scott to replant the forest that had been illegally logged. Using cell phones, we can document what trees are there and where there's the blank areas, and document their plans to plant so that they can gain access to the carbon offset marketplace.
Durante 10 anos, a gente tem plantado 1.000
Everyone can do something to stop people this year. Go to your country representative, to the Copenhagen Climate Change Treaty, and get to support REDD.
E assim a gente quer manter a nossa estado a partir da nossa sabedoria, damos a floresta para o mundo.
Pretty sure he was in the film we saw the first day, Children of the Amazon.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He's everywhere. He's really cool. Exactly. And he's a true leader. If you talk to him, you can definitely tell that. And well, this is one of the outcomes that this is a news about how they were able to identify some illegal logging going on in the forest using that Google system, but also they come up with different ways to monitor the forest. But the thing is, as you can expect, the loggers were not really happy with the Surui decision of not logging anymore. And he mentioned in the video that like 11 people were killed, and they often threat Suruí's life, and because of that, he walks around with 2 guards from the National Army all the time. It's just how it is. Many places in Amazon, really hard to find the legal activity. But with all of that, they were able to come up with the REDD project, and this is just a cover of the project. And then, of course, for that project, they had to do this. They had to model the deforestation. This is sort of what you guys were doing here, but it gets more complicated, right? This is spatially explicit. It involves a lot of math and modeling. But with this, they were able to go to the market and say, hey, this is the amount of money that we should receive for protecting our forests. So can you guys pay us? But then let's just take a step back and see, to answer this question, who is paying for that? Because I think this is really important for development practitioners and conservation practitioners. And previously I didn't have this slide in the presentation, but then when I was reading your discussion, I noticed, oh, these guys know what they're talking about. They are right on the critical issues of REDD. So maybe we should just cover some points that are more interesting. So if you look so the Suruís, they wanted to sell the credits that they got from the REDD project into the carbon market. But carbon market's really a buzzy word. The carbon market can be divided in 2 sorts of different markets. The first one is the compliance market, and that was basically created as a result from the international negotiations at the United Nations level, at the international level. So in 1997, they come up with the Kyoto Protocol, and then pretty much countries who were on board with this idea of the Kyoto Protocol, they committed themselves to reduce carbon emissions. And they can partially do this offsetting of emissions through carbon market that was initiated with the Kyoto Protocol. But under this sort of market, I mean, really the buyers of this market are countries because they want to reach their reduction target that was set by the Kyoto Protocol. Okay, I feel like I'm losing you guys. But anyways, under this market, you only can have reforestation activities. And then if this new market emerged, it's called the voluntary carbon market. Here, it's not regulated by the United Nations, but it's regulated by voluntary standards that you follow. We're going to look into that. The buyers here are mostly organizations. And here, you can have REDD activities. So whenever you are talking about a REDD project that's already going on, you're not talking about this. You're not talking about UNFCCC. You're talking about the voluntary carbon market. But things get a little more complicated. You do have the annual climate change negotiations who are looking into REDD, and they even had a United Nations REDD program going on for some countries. So maybe in the future, REDD will be part of a future compliance market or whatever it's defined by a future climate change agreement that will replace the Kyoto Protocol. And at the same time, you do have bilateral agreements between countries, and Norway loves this kind of things. They're giving billions, bazillions of dollars to countries like Brazil or Indonesia. And how this all is going to play out in the future, we don't really know. But maybe REDD will be part of a market. Maybe those agreements will be also considered for under this compliance market. We don't know. But this is sort of a broad overview that I think it's important to keep in mind.
A pergunta é se todo o dinheiro que circula é dinheiro privado ou público.
That really depends on what you're talking about. If you're looking into those bilateral agreements, that money is coming from Norway. So it's public money from Norway. If you're looking into buyers of this voluntary carbon market, those are private money. So they are big organizations who are into sustainability and they want to offset their emissions. So they go to the market and then they can tell their clients, you know, buy from me because we have a zero carbon emission associated with our project. But it really matters.
You do have two types of one from the public and one from private.
Yeah.
Which one is more successful?
But that also depends. If you look at the projects that are going on right now, most of them rely on this. However, if you look into the amount of money that is being announced for REDD, I think those are way more.
Because when you think about those funds, think about public money funding towards people.
Yeah.
Not even, that's not like the carbon market. That's not out there for business. That's more into prevention and conservation policy.
Yeah, but that money is coming through bilateral agreements through the Amazon fund, as far as I know. Okay, I'm sorry guys. So anyways, those are if you're working in the voluntary carbon market, those are standards that you can use. They sort of give you the rules of the game. So if you wanna get your project validated according to our standard, you need to follow our rule. And then it needs to be subjected to a third-party auditing process. So we can say that everything is working in accordance with the rules. And the Suruís, they went for those two standards. And those are really the leading standards in the market. This is more for accounting the carbon, and this is more to secure that social safeguards are in place. And if you go to the websites, you can see that the Suruí projects are there and so forth. And Almir really, the Suruís, they got really famous for this sort of initiative. So you can see him going to different countries. He told me that he has visited like 30 or 40 different countries since they started with this initiative. But this guy really knows how to sell the project. This guy is very charismatic, engaging, and he truly loves what he's doing. And this is a photo of a very historic mark for the project, because that's when the Suruís were selling their carbon credits for the first time. The first set of carbon credits that they generated in the forest. So you can see here, I think this guy is the Rondônia governor, and then he's giving a speech. This girl here represents the company that's buying the credits. She's from Natura. It's a Brazilian company really into sustainability. She's my friend. And then just a quick overview of what are some key important things that we observed in this Suruí project. Well, to start with, they were able to restructure their governance system to come up with a more participatory and democratic system. That was not only for the REDD project. That came that started before the REDD project. But this is what they did. So now they have representatives from the village. They can discuss what they're going on. They can discuss what are the next strategies of the community and so forth. Another thing, key thing, is that they come up with a Surui fund. And the Surui, this is a summary of 100+ pages that you can find online about the Surui fund and how it works. But basically, they come up with a structure to avoid corruption and to avoid internal conflicts in the community. And if you read the REDD literature on governance, you see that people are often worried about those issues because, well, we're talking about 4 countries, and you can find a lot of corruption there. And you also don't want to go to a tribe and say, who's the leader here? You're the leader, I'm going to give you $1 million so I can implement a REDD project here. And then the guy can keep all the money for himself, and that starts creating more conflict with the community than actually helping the community. And the Surui fund was designed to avoid those things. And this is just the way that they decided to model the baseline. This is a little more technical, but they pretty much come up with a dynamic model of deforestation that takes into account the demographics of the Surui. Why is this important? Let's just compare the Surui model with this other deforestation model, who's from the Juma project, another project in Brazil. And this is how they model deforestation using historical deforestation rates, a very straightforward approach. I remember I showed this to some Chinese professors who were visiting my university back in Brazil, and when they saw that, they were like, whoa, no way, this is completely wrong. This is completely wrong. Because you can see how the project started, and in 50 and some years later, you have all this red area who indicates deforestation. You can say, is that really realistic? I mean, according to the math and the methodologies, you can come up with a result like that. But then if you compare it to what the Suruís did, that was a really more conservative approach. And this is what you see happening in the reserve. So this gives a lot of credibility to the project as well. People look at this and say, oh, okay, this makes sense. This is just another thing that happened with the Surui project. And at the same time, when they were building this model, they were engaging the community because they needed to ask them, how much hectares do you plant? How much time do you work? And things like that, that they put it together to come up with this. This is just a side kind of thing, but I think it's really neat because it's the only REDD project in the world who has adopted an approach like that. And if you look into the land use literature, land use change literature, you will see that people really say that those kinds of models are more realistic for it. And so just some take-home message from the Suruís. They were able to engage the community because they had a participatory governance system. They also had this free, prior, and informative consent conducted with the community to make sure that everybody, or at least most of the community, was engaged into REDD. They had the Surui fund to ensure equitable use of the revenues, avoiding corruption and disputes. Oh, I don't know. And then they had the community participation with the modeling, the deforestation modeling, which gives credibility to the project and also engage the community. They have a sense they are actually participating in the project. And that's very important to keep the community together, especially when you're talking about things that they really, they have a tough time understanding. Carbon, what is that? How come I have carbon coming out of my forest? I've never seen that. And then this might be a really key point of this project that might not be replicated in other communities. Well, they had a common goal that was shared by the community, but they also had this amazing, charismatic chief who was really fighting for the conservation of their land. And they all were engaged, and it ties back to the way that makes decisions in the land, but they all wanted sustainable development. They wanted to stop cutting down the forests and losing their culture. And this is just a more complex view of REDD, right? This paper is focused more on the political view, a social view, but I think for us as practitioners, it's really important to take all of those different views into consideration when you're designing or working with REDD, because you have issues with all of them. And then I think this is just a great way to end this, and maybe a few questions. I keep looking at my watch, but it's not. So here we have some pictures, right? Some people against REDD, the Amir receiving the check for their project, Logan from national programs going on, and then this quote from this really interesting article, if you want to think of it. Oh, we can just. Okay, that was it. Thank you.
Thank you.